Hello there! Welcome to a video called Object-Oriented Programming and P5 Events. The clue is in the title, as you might imagine. Now, was it a terrible idea to use the chipmunk effect for these little bits of video so that you could ostensibly see my face and we're a little bit more relatable? If you have some chipmunk blood, then perhaps this is really helping. Otherwise, it could have been an error on my part. So what are we talking about in this video? We know that one of the very important things about programming in JavaScript in general, in programming in general, is this idea of handling events as they occur. And we've seen that in P5 we do that by defining special functions like mouse pressed and key pressed that react when those specific events happen. Now that we're doing object-oriented programming, the question arises, like, how do we do it in this new context? Can our objects, like a flower for instance, react to something like a mouse press? And, well, the answer is yes. It's almost always yes in programming, right? Unless you want to do something truly outlandish. But how? So that's the topic of this video. So let's deal with it. It's not too complicated. So let's begin with the same program that we've been kind of working with, which is this garden, right? So we've got this idea of a flower class. The flower can be constructed with its constructor that sets a bunch of properties. It can be displayed with its display method that uses those properties to display the flower to the screen. And then in the main script, we create a bunch of these flowers and add them to our garden, which has an array called flowers that stores them all, and we display them on the screen. And we do both of those things with for loops because of their relationship to arrays and going through every element. The resulting program, as you may recall, looks like this, bunch of different flowers. Now, currently this program is totally non-interactive, right? I can't do anything. And one of the things I immediately think of when I look at this program is it would be neat if I could click on a flower, maybe just in its center or something, and it would grow, because that would make me feel like I have some relationship to this garden. Otherwise, it's a bit passive. So how would I do that? Well, I want the flower to react to being clicked on, right? So my initial thought is probably that, and it should be instinctively, I think this is correct, that I want a method in my flower that can react to being clicked. That makes sense because now that we're keeping all of the code associated with our flowers in one place in our class, this is where I should have any method that responds to a specific kind of event. So I would probably want to define a method called mouse pressed, and I would want to do the appropriate thing here. So remember, I'm trying to detect whether a flower was clicked on, so I'm going to need to do the usual stuff, right? We've got this idea of calculating the distance between the mouse and this flower. So we're going to say let d, my little abbreviation for distance, equals dist. And we're going to say what's the different distance between this dot x and this dot y, that's the position of this flower that we would currently be checking, and the mouse, mouse.x, mouse.y. Note that I can talk about mouse x and mouse y here inside my class. P5 is kind of like everywhere in some sense, at least in terms of its variables and functions. Oh goodness me, look at that horrible piece of programming. I apologize. I should restart this video, but I will not. No curly brackets needed after declaring and assigning to a variable there. But what I do want is now an if statement. I need to check if this distance is small enough to be considered as a click inside this flower's kind of flower head. So what is that? It would have to be less than the size of the flower. Oh goodness me, this flower's size divided by 2 because that we want the radius of the center part of the flower. And I want to add on to that this flower's petal thickness. I don't need to divide this by 2 because the petal thickness is just how thick it is, like around the rim of the flower. So if the distance is less than this, the radius of the center plus the thickness of the petals, then that would mean that the mouse was just clicked inside the head of this flower. So what do I want to do? I think I could do all kinds of things. I could change its color, I could make it spin around and go flying off the screen, like the sky's the limit, but all I want to do in this instance is make it grow a little bit. So to do that, I want to change one of its properties, and in particular, I want to change the property called stem length, right? That's how long the flower's stem is, and I want that to get bigger. So I'm going to say this.stem length, which is the stem length of the current flower, is assigned itself, the stem length as it is now, plus an amount. Just for sort of ease of use right now, I'm just going to use a number here. It's going to get bigger by 5 pixels, okay? Now, if I leave it at that, then we're going to have a slightly weird behavior if I clicked on things, because the stem would grow downwards, right? Because it would get longer, but it would grow down. And that's not what I want, because the X and the Y of this flower determine where the head of the flower is. So I actually want that to move up in order for this to kind of look like it's growing upwards. So I can't just change the stem length. I also need to change the Y position. And I need to subtract 5 from it to make it go upwards. So the head of the flower goes up and the length of the stem goes kind of down, and so we end up with the overall effect that it looks like the flower grew upwards. Okay, so this would be our function. Sorry, our method. Mouse pressed method calculates the distance from this particular flower to the mouse location to see if it was clicked on. It checks if it was clicked on by calculating how far away it was, and checking it's less than this minimum distance, which corresponds to clicking inside the flower. And if it works, it adds to the stem length and subtracts from the Y to make it look like the flower has grown. I mean, this whole idea of make it look like the flower has grown is kind of weird. Like, because the flower is technically just a line and an ellipse, maybe it's not a real flower in some kind of philosophical sense, but in a very real sense, you know, the stem length does get longer, and its position of the head of the flower does get higher, and that is what growing is. So it really grows. Let's say that it really does grow. Now, in a nice world, this would just work, right? We've got a mouse pressed method. We know that that's what P5 calls it, so maybe we would hope that this would just work. But if I do go over here and I go click, 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 it doesn't do anything. And there aren't any errors. Thank God there were no errors. I should not have started saying that before loading the console. So that's not the problem. The problem is that P5 doesn't actually automatically call methods called mouse pressed inside classes. It doesn't look inside your class to check for them. So in order to do it, we still have to do the old-fashioned thing that we normally do, which is that if we want P5 to do anything with a mouse pressed, we still have to have the mouse pressed function. And this is true of all event handlers. We have to have the function in the main script, right? So after draw, for example, we have mouse pressed. But what I want to do when the mouse is pressed is I want to check if any of the flowers had the mouse pressed on them, right? So what I need to do is I need to go through all of the flowers, which I do with my standard go through all the flowers for loop, which is to say this one. It's the same as the one above. I should have maybe copied and pasted it, but I thought that would be more confusing. So a for loop that goes through, oh, see, I made a mistake there, flowers, from 0 up to the length of the flowers array in my garden. And for each one, let's just do the same sort of structure just because it feels sort of clear. Garden of flowers. Get the flower at this current index of I. You said messing around with the tabbing. And then tell that flower the mouse was pressed. And then that flower can handle whether the mouse was pressed on it, and it will do the appropriate thing. And if the mouse wasn't pressed on it, that flower will do nothing, right? And we do that for every flower so that we check whether the mouse was clicked on any of them, okay? So the key thing here is we have to define our mouse pressed function that P5 will automatically call out in the main program, and then we can go through all our flowers and tell them individually, hey, the mouse was pressed. You know, do your mouse pressed checking stuff and handle the situation for yourself. Again, this way we keep that separation between what a flower does and what the rest of the program does. So the flower can handle mouse pressed all on its own. So what's the result of this? Hopefully, I click on a flower. Oh, worked. And it grows, right? So if I click in the body of the flower, I can make them grow. The head gets higher because I subtracted from the Y, and the stem length gets longer because I added to it, and so the result is growing flowers. Quite satisfying. Like, that's pretty good. Like for just a nice little program. You can see here both flowers think they were clicked on, which is fair because they were, like the mouse is over both of them. If I wanted to only make the foremost flower, the nearest flower, you know, the one that's displaying first, be clicked, that would require some more fiddling, which I am not going to deal with here, but that is a thing that we can, of course, do if we want to. Okay, that is the story of object-oriented programming in P5 events. It's the same for the keyboard, for key pressed, for key released, for key typed, for mouse released, etc., mouse dragged. All of those things you define the event handler function in your main program, and then you tell all of the objects that might be interested in knowing about that event explicitly by calling their method that handles that event. And that takes care of business. So thank you for watching the video. I hope that you are doing well, that you are comfortable. If you're not comfortable, please try to get more comfortable because it's good to feel that way, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.